On the evening when everything was about to change forever, after the final meal had been shared and the ritual cup passed among the gathered followers, Jesus of Nazareth made a decision that would never appear in any authorized scripture. He sent away almost everyone present. The room emptied until only 3 witnesses remained behind: Peter, James, and John, men who had proven themselves capable of holding secrets that could shatter worlds. What happened next defied everything they thought they understood about their teacher. He lowered himself onto the worn stone beneath their feet and began moving his finger across the dust-covered floor, crafting something that had existed long before written language, before the first temple was erected, before the waters of the great deluge swallowed the ancient world. The moment his finger completed the final stroke of this primordial design, every flame in that enclosed space convulsed wildly, reacting to an invisible presence that suddenly could no longer remain in proximity to what had just been revealed. This was not scripture. This was not parable. This was a weapon disguised as geometry, a vibrational key that the architects of human imprisonment have spent 2,000 years attempting to erase from every record, every text, every fragment of parchment they could seize. Yet here you are, staring at these words right now, and that collision between you and this information was never random. Something inside your consciousness recognized a frequency before your rational mind could intervene, before you could talk yourself out of clicking, before you could dismiss this as just another video. That recognition, that pull you felt. That was your soul remembering something your programmed mind was trained to forget. If you enjoy stories like this, consider subscribing. Most people who watch aren't subscribed yet. To grasp why this particular geometric form holds devastating power against the unseen forces that architect your reality, you must first understand the nature of the cage you have inhabited since your first breath in this dimension. This is not confinement made of iron bars or concrete walls. This is imprisonment constructed from frequency itself, a cage so elegantly engineered that the vast majority of captives will passionately defend the very mechanisms of their own enslavement. When the Nag Hammadi library emerged from the Egyptian sand in 1945, its discovery represented nothing less than the detonation of a truth bomb that the institutional church had believed successfully destroyed 15 centuries prior. These ancient manuscripts contained a creation narrative so profoundly divergent from the sanitized version you were taught in Sunday school that early church authorities mobilized extreme violence to prevent its circulation. According to these suppressed texts, the material cosmos you currently inhabit was never crafted by the supreme infinite intelligence, the boundless awareness the Gnostics identified as the monad. Instead, this entire dimensional prison was manufactured by an inferior entity, a blind and foolish craftsman who genuinely convinced himself he represented the totality of divine power. The ancient texts identified this deluded architect as Yaldabaoth, the demiurge, the false god who declared himself supreme because he could not perceive anything beyond his own limited creation. But this counterfeit creator did not operate in isolation. Serving beneath his authority existed an entire infrastructure of parasitic intelligences, a bureaucracy of cosmic wardens whose continued existence depends absolutely on one resource harvested exclusively from you: your electromagnetic emissions, your focused attention, your biochemical responses to psychological suffering. These entities, known across Gnostic literature as the Archons, have constructed an entire closed-loop system designed for a single outcome: keeping your consciousness locked in a perpetual state of spiritual amnesia while simultaneously farming the low-frequency emotional states that constitute their only source of nourishment. Fear, rage, humiliation, hopelessness. These are not merely uncomfortable feelings that occasionally pass through your awareness. To these parasitic intelligences, these emotional frequencies represent the equivalent of food, fuel, currency. And here is where the architecture of control reveals its most disturbing sophistication. The Archons do not passively wait for human beings to naturally generate these harvested emotions through organic life experience. They actively cultivate them, They insert thought forms directly into human consciousness that masquerade as your own internal dialogue. That instantaneous flood of inadequacy that crashes over you precisely when you stand on the threshold of genuine transformation. That insidious voice whispering that you lack sufficient worth, sufficient preparation, sufficient permission to claim what you desire. That bizarre compulsion to sabotage your own momentum just as breakthrough becomes visible on the horizon. These are not always authentic expressions of your sovereign consciousness. Many of these thought patterns are externally broadcasted transmissions, frequencies deliberately aimed at human awareness to trigger specific emotional responses that can then be harvested for consumption. But what the Archons never anticipated was that certain souls would incarnate carrying something they could neither replicate nor extinguish, and you might be one of them. The Gospel of Philip, one of the most dangerous texts Rome fought desperately to keep away from common eyes, states the mechanism of deception with startling directness. It reveals that the Archonic rulers deliberately sought to deceive humanity after recognizing that human beings possessed an inherent kinship with what is authentically good, with what is genuinely divine. Their strategy involved stealing the names and labels associated with genuine goodness and deliberately assigning those terms to things that actively harm and diminish consciousness. Through this linguistic sorcery, through the corruption of meaning itself, they deceive and bind humanity to accept poison while believing it to be medicine. Read those words again and let their implications settle into your awareness. The control system operates by corrupting language, by inverting meaning, by making you worship your own chains while calling that worship freedom. This is not primitive superstition whispered by paranoid mystics in desert caves. This is the most sophisticated consciousness prison ever engineered, and it has been operating continuously for thousands of years with increasing refinement and precision. However, a critical flaw existed in their design from the beginning, an unexpected vulnerability that even their vast intelligence failed to anticipate. Certain souls incarnated into this material dimension, carrying something the Archons cannot synthesize through any technology or ritual. A divine spark, an indestructible fragment of the monad itself, wrapped temporarily in flesh, but never truly contained by materiality. The Gnostics called these particular incarnated consciousnesses the pneumatics, the carriers of spirit, beings who walk through the material world but were never entirely of it. And if you have continued watching this video until this precise moment, if these words are generating a felt resonance somewhere deep in the cavity of your chest, rather than merely processing as interesting intellectual concepts in your thinking mind, then you already possess certainty about which category describes your true nature. The Archons identified this existential threat to their system from the very beginning of human history. They understood immediately that certain human beings could not be completely controlled, could not be entirely hypnotized by the material illusion, could not be reduced to predictable biological machines. So they developed specific countermeasures targeted precisely at souls like yours. The strategy unfolds across multiple vectors. Keep them perpetually distracted with manufactured crises and trivial entertainment. Keep them trapped in cyclical self-doubt that prevents decisive action. Keep them systematically isolated from other spark carriers who might trigger mutual recognition and awakening. And above all other priorities, keep them ignorant of the tools, techniques, and knowledge that could facilitate their liberation. This is the junction where the historical figure of Jesus of Nazareth becomes profoundly dangerous to every official narrative. The institutional church constructed in his name would have you believe his purpose was singular and simple. He came to forgive human sin through his sacrificial death. Accept the correct theological beliefs, perform the approved rituals, and you will receive salvation after your physical body expires. But the Gnostic Gospels, the texts that survived Rome's purge, present a radically incompatible portrait. In these forbidden documents, Jesus is not primarily a blood sacrifice to appease an angry God. He is a teacher, a revealer of occulted knowledge, a conscious being who deliberately descended into this dimensional prison specifically to hand the inmates keys to their own cells. If this video awakened something within you, it's because there are truths about Jesus that were never meant for the masses. The ebook Jesus Beyond the Church reveals what was removed, burned, and rewritten, erased teachings, silenced texts, and spiritual codes that survived outside institutional control. This is not a religious book. It is a record of what was left outside the church, and of what you were never meant to find. For a limited time, you will receive 3 exclusive super bonuses, unlocked only for those who access it now. The link is in the pinned comment. If you made it this far, it may not be a coincidence. Some truths reveal themselves only when we are ready. If this information is landing differently than anything you have encountered before, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps this reach others who are searching for the same answers you once were. In the Gospel of Thomas, unearthed among the Nag Hammadi manuscripts, Jesus articulates something so threatening to institutional power structures that it could never survive incorporation into any mainstream religious canon. He declares with absolute clarity that if you bring forth what already exists within you, what you externalize will become your salvation. Conversely, if you fail to bring forth what lies dormant within you, what remains unexpressed will ultimately become the instrument of your destruction. This teaching has nothing whatsoever to do with belief systems or theological allegiance. This is instruction concerning activation, concerning the emergence of something already embedded in your consciousness that requires only your participation to become operationally functional. And among the most potent activation tools he transmitted to his inner circle was never intended for verbal communication. It was designed to be rendered visible, to be drawn, to be transformed from concept into geometric form. The symbol under discussion tonight appears in fragmentary forms scattered across dozens of esoteric traditions, always partially concealed, always encoded within larger contexts. Early Christian artistic expression, from the period before the Council of Nicaea, contains geometric configurations that later church authorities systematically painted over, chiseled away, or declared heretical. The Coptic Christian communities of Egypt preserved certain marks and seals that Rome officially condemned as demonic. The Knights Templar, following their extensive excavations beneath the ruins of Solomon's Temple, began incorporating specific geometric patterns into their architectural designs and private ceremonial practices. These same patterns led directly to their violent suppression by a pope who publicly accused them of worshipping devils and privately feared what they had discovered. Pose a simple question to yourself. Why would the most powerful religious institution in human history invest centuries of effort hunting down a shape? Why would they systematically burn libraries, execute scholars, and declare entire populations heretical over geometric knowledge? The answer is simultaneously simple and deeply disturbing. Because it functions. Because the symbol actually produces the effects the ancient texts claim it produces. The underlying mechanism is not magical in the way fantasy entertainment portrays magic through special effects and dramatic gestures. It is scientific in ways that contemporary materialist science is only beginning to recognize at the cutting edge of quantum physics and consciousness research. Everything manifest in this universe vibrates at specific frequencies, and this includes phenomena you typically consider non-physical. Your thoughts generate measurable electromagnetic signatures. Your emotions create distinct frequency patterns. Your intentions, when focused with clarity, generate electromagnetic fields that sensitive instruments can detect and measure. The HeartMath Institute has documented this extensively through rigorous research protocols. The human heart produces an electromagnetic field that radiates several feet beyond the physical boundaries of your skin. And the structure of that field, its coherence or incoherence, its harmony or chaos, changes in real time based on your emotional and mental states. Geometry functions as frozen frequency, as vibration made static and visible. Every shape, every configuration of lines and angles holds a specific vibrational signature that interacts with consciousness in predictable ways. This is why sacred geometry appears independently across every ancient civilization on Earth, why the same patterns emerge in cultures separated by oceans and millennia with no possible physical contact. They were not copying each other's homework. They were discovering the same universal truth through direct experience and experimentation. Certain forms amplify certain frequencies, and the form Jesus revealed that night creates something the Archons absolutely cannot survive exposure to. Take a moment and share this video with someone you know who is ready for this information. You already know exactly who I am talking about. Trust that instinct. Specific geometric configurations create fields that interact with consciousness in ways that are reproducible and verifiable once you understand the principles involved. The symbol Jesus traced onto that stone floor in the upper room was not randomly chosen or artistically improvised. It was precise. It was deliberate. It was a geometric configuration specifically engineered to generate a frequency that Archonic intelligences cannot tolerate in their proximity. Not because this frequency destroys them in the way physical weapons destroy physical targets, but because it operates on a vibrational level so far outside their functional range that they cannot match it, cannot corrupt it, cannot interfere with it. It creates a coherence field, a sphere of sovereign awareness that their parasitic frequency simply cannot penetrate or manipulate. Consider the analogy of radio transmissions. The Archons broadcast their thought insertions and emotional manipulations on specific frequencies, on low vibration channels optimized for fear, confusion, and fragmentation. The symbol, when drawn with conscious intention and activated through proper internal states, shifts your personal electromagnetic field to a frequency so elevated and coherent that their transmissions cannot reach you. Their implanted thoughts slide off your awareness without gaining traction. Their emotional manipulations encounter a unified field that provides no vulnerable points of entry. For potentially the first time in your entire life, you experience what your mind actually feels like, what your authentic thoughts actually sound like, without the constant background noise of external interference. The Vatican's systematic suppression of this knowledge follows a trail marked by blood and ash that stretches across 2,000 years of institutional violence. When the Roman Emperor Constantine convened the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE, the publicly stated objective was to unify Christian doctrine and resolve theological disputes. But beneath the surface debates about the nature of Christ and the calculation of Easter, a far more calculated purge was unfolding in shadows and backrooms. Texts were being sorted and evaluated not according to their spiritual authenticity or their proximity to original teachings, but according to their threat level to centralized institutional control. Any gospel, any teaching, any text that empowered the individual practitioner, that suggested direct access to divine consciousness without requiring institutional mediation, was marked for systematic destruction. The Gnostic texts were not simply excluded from the official biblical canon. They were hunted with an intensity usually reserved for military enemies. Bishops received explicit written orders to burn any copies discovered within their jurisdictions. Possession of these texts became a capital crime punishable by execution. The Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, the Apocryphon of John, these were not obscure scribblings produced by fringe lunatics. Many of these manuscripts were older than the canonical Gospels that eventually received official approval. Multiple scholars have argued compellingly that the Gospel of Thomas contains sayings attributed to Jesus that are more historically authentic than material found in Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. But historical authenticity was never the criterion being applied during these decisions. Control was the only metric that mattered, and among all the suppressed knowledge, among all the banned texts and forbidden teachings, the geometric instructions received the most aggressive and violent erasure. Why? Because words are flexible. Words can be reinterpreted, twisted, and manipulated to serve institutional power. A priest class can position themselves as necessary interpreters of complicated theological language. But geometry is absolute. A shape either generates a specific frequency or it does not. There is no room for intermediaries. When you draw the symbol correctly, when you activate it through proper internal states, you access its power directly and immediately. No church required, no tithe demanded, no confession necessary. No authority figure needed to grant you permission. This terrified Rome more than any army ever could, and what Jesus learned during his missing years explains exactly why. The geometric form itself draws from principles and knowledge systems that predate the emergence of Christianity entirely by thousands of years. Jesus, during his years of preparation before beginning his public teaching ministry, traveled far more extensively than the official narrative has ever been willing to admit. The gaps in the gospel accounts, the so-called silent years between age 12 and age 30, were not actually silent at all. Esoteric traditions preserved across Egypt, India, Tibet, and Persia contain records of a Hebrew teacher who journeyed to study the ancient mysteries at their source. In Egypt, he would have encountered the geometric principles encoded directly into the architecture of the pyramids and temples. Shapes deliberately designed to interact with human consciousness and facilitate specific altered states of awareness. In the Eastern territories, he would have been exposed to the science of yantras, sacred diagrams that function as focal points for concentrating mental and spiritual energy into coherent forms. What he ultimately taught to his closest disciples represented a synthesis, a geometric form that combined the protective encoding principles of Egyptian sacred science with the consciousness-activating technologies of Eastern wisdom traditions, all filtered through his direct connection to the monad, the true infinite source that exists beyond the demiurge's counterfeit creation. The symbol itself contains three primary components, and each element serves a distinct and essential function within the overall system. The outer boundary represents your sovereign field, the energetic perimeter of your being, the edge where your consciousness meets external reality. This is not metaphorical poetry or New Age fantasy. Your physical body generates measurable electromagnetic fields through the electrical activity of your nervous system and the rhythmic pumping of your heart. These fields have edges, boundaries, places where your energy meets and interacts with the external environment. The outer line of the symbol, when drawn with conscious intention and sustained awareness, declares and reinforces that boundary at both the physical and metaphysical levels. It is a statement written in the fundamental language of frequency that all consciousness instinctively understands. I am sovereign. I am whole. I am complete. Nothing enters this field without my explicit conscious permission. The inner pattern creates coherence, creates unity, creates integration. The Archonic strategy for control depends absolutely on fragmentation. They require your energy scattered across 1,000 trivial concerns. They need your attention divided between endless manufactured distractions. They depend on your sense of self being broken into controllable fragments that can be manipulated independently. The internal geometry of the symbol generates a harmonic pattern that draws your fragmented energy back into alignment, back into unity, back into coherence. It functions like a tuning fork for consciousness. When you focus sustained attention on this pattern, your scattered frequencies begin to synchronize, to organize themselves, to cohere into a unified field that operates with exponentially more power than the fragmented state the archons depend upon for their control system to function. The central point represents the spark, your direct and unbreakable connection to the monad. This is the component of your being that was never created by the demiurge. This is the fragment of infinite consciousness that chose to incarnate into this dimensional prison, but was never truly imprisoned by materiality. The center point of the symbol focuses your attention precisely on this eternal aspect of your being. It reminds you at a level deeper than conceptual thought that you are not your body, not your circumstances, not your programmed beliefs, not your social roles. You are a point of awareness that existed before this lifetime began and will continue existing after this body returns to dust. When these three components combine through conscious activation, they create something the archons have absolutely no defense against, and you are about to learn exactly how to wield it. If you have made it this far into this video, hit that subscribe button right now. There are more keys coming, and you are going to want access when they arrive. The process of activation begins before you ever make contact between pen and paper. Your internal state determines whether you are merely drawing a symbol or activating a key. If you approach this mechanically, if you simply copy lines without engaging your consciousness in the process, you will create nothing more than ink on paper. The geometry requires your active participation. It requires you to bring forth what exists within you, exactly as Jesus instructed in the Gospel of Thomas. Find a physical space where you will not be interrupted for at least 15 unbroken minutes. This is not about superstitious ritual or religious ceremony. This is about signal clarity. When your attention is constantly divided by interruptions, your electromagnetic field remains scattered and incoherent. You need sufficient uninterrupted time to allow your energy to settle into coherence before you begin the drawing process. Sit comfortably in this space and close your eyes. Do not attempt to force any particular state of consciousness. Simply allow your breath to slow naturally without controlling it. Place your attention on your heartbeat. Feel it pulsing rhythmically in your chest. This is not merely a mechanical pump circulating blood through biological plumbing. Your heart generates the strongest and most extensive electromagnetic field in your entire body, a field that radiates beyond your skin, beyond your clothing, beyond the walls of whatever room you currently occupy. With each beat, you are broadcasting electromagnetic information into the environment around you. The crucial question is whether you are broadcasting consciously with intention or unconsciously on autopilot. As you rest in sustained awareness of your heartbeat, allow a single recognition to arise naturally. Not a thought you force or manufacture, but a knowing you simply permit to surface. You exist. Before your name was given to you, before your history unfolded, before every label this world has placed upon your identity, there is simple existence, pure awareness. This is the spark. This is what the archons cannot touch, cannot manufacture, cannot corrupt, cannot extinguish. When you feel that recognition, not just think it conceptually, but feel it as a living reality in your chest, you are ready to begin. Now open your eyes and take the pen in your hand. Understand that what you are about to draw is not separate from what you just experienced. The symbol is the external expression of the internal state. The geometry and the consciousness are one unified phenomenon. Draw the outer circle first. Let your hand move slowly, deliberately, with full attention. As the line curves around and finally returns to meet itself, feel the boundary it represents. This is where your sovereign field begins and the external world ends. Nothing crosses this line without your conscious invitation and permission. Hold that knowing steady in your awareness as the circle completes. Inside the circle, draw the equal-armed cross, not tilted diagonally, not ornately decorated. Simple and clean. 4 straight lines meeting at the center point and extending outward to touch the inner edge of the circle. This is the coherence pattern, the 4 directions, the 4 elements, the scattered pieces of your fragmented energy being called home to unity. As you draw each line, feel the fragmentation of your daily existence beginning to settle, to organize itself, to unify. At the center point where the 4 lines intersect, place a single dot, small but deliberate. This is the spark. This is you, the real you, the awareness that observes your thoughts, that existed before your first memory and will continue beyond your last breath. As you place this point, let your attention rest there. You are not drawing a symbol. You are remembering who you are. This is the seal. Circle, cross, and center point. So simple that your rational mind wants to reject it as too basic. So powerful that empires have burned libraries to suppress it. Keep this drawing somewhere. You will see it daily. Trace it again whenever you feel the familiar interference patterns returning. The sudden doubts, the implanted thoughts, the energy drains that have no visible external source. Each time you draw it consciously, you reinforce the frequency. Each time you trace those lines with sovereign awareness, you broadcast a signal the archons cannot answer. You were never meant to be a prisoner in this dimension. You incarnated carrying a key. You simply forgot you possessed it. Tonight you remembered. What you do with that remembering is entirely your choice. the circle is complete. The cross is drawn. The spark is lit.